Too much downriver there where I usually sit on the quad. So I waded across the river to get to this. This is a bit of an island, high dry land in the middle of this corner. There's so much life here, it's stupid. The river is absolutely chock full of bear bait, sockeye salmon. There's dead fish laying around. There's so many eagles, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm looking at I think I'm looking at the most Canadian vultures I've ever seen in my life. Maybe I'll show them to you guys right now. Check this out. That is a lot of vultures. For here, I don't know what they're circling about. Probably a whole pile of dead salmon laid on the banks upriver there somewhere, and that's what they're all about. But anyway, it's a good place to set up out of the blazing sunlight, which screws up the filming part. And if I did run the camera, you wouldn't be able to see up here at all while I'm down there sitting on the quad, because it just caused too many shadows. And you'd miss out on potential lots of life here, right? So, we'll zoom in a little bit like this. That log is where I left my trail camera before and caught all those huge bears walking across those logs, emerging from that long grass. If a bear doesn't come out while I'm here, it's going to be amazing. So, let's see what we get going. Okay. Let me know when a bear comes up behind me. There's lots of food here. They shouldn't want to pick on me too much, but you never know, right? Alright. Who do we got? What do we got? We got a lot. We got thousands. Got lots to share. Here we go. Mark this one as red and listen to this. I've shared 4 previous stories, but not this one. Hi Steve, hope all is well. Shout out to Sarah. I've shared 4 of my experiences with you and your viewers. This is the one I thought I'd keep to myself forever, but hearing similar stories sent in by your viewers, I will tell mine. Good work. Never be scared. I've been hunting 42 years. As an old telephone lineman, I like to place my stands no less than 25 feet off the ground. Keeps my scent above noses and other hunters out of my stands. Unfortunately, in our area of North Carolina, we have a serious trespassing problem. I've had multiple run-ins with these scumbags over the years, and on this trip I would encounter a special trespasser. A hunter knows the difference of 2 legs versus 4 in the woods. Hearing turkeys, squirrels, cats, and deer, just a few animals that I encounter while hunting. I'd placed my stand about 30 feet up a huge locust tree overlooking a 3-way funnel leading to a grassy field. The tree is wider than myself at my stand placement height, so I could not be seen by anything behind me. I'm in the mountains, about 40 yards from the top of the mountain, just far enough off the ridge to keep out of the higher winds. I had about 100 yards looking down the hill to the intersection of the 3 trails. I've been in the stand for 3.5 hours. I had 10 minutes of shooting light left when I heard movement below me. I observed 3 does walking in from my left, working their way to the field. I was not interested in shooting a doe, so I just watched them pass. At this time, I became aware of someone, 2-legged something, walking in behind me at the top of the ridge. I became infuriated. My blood began to boil. Another damn trespasser. I turned. The sun was just going down behind the next mountain over, allowing me to see west without being blinded. I watched the ridge closely. I saw the figure coming out from behind the laurels. A couple fellas over there downriver where I normally park brought a, looks like a hunting dog. The hound, you can hear it, and some other flavor dog. Lucky I didn't bring Ruby down because they're off leash and don't need the grief, right? Anyways, sorry. I watched the ridge closely. I saw the figure coming out from behind the laurels. He eased up to a tree, placed his right hand on the tree where a small limb come out. It was maybe a foot off of his head. He was about 2.5 feet from the tree. At this moment, I noticed how tall he was. So I'm going through my memory bank. Okay, who's the tallest poaching lowlife that sneaks around trespassing and poaching? I can't think of anyone in that group of scum over 5'5" either way. I'm effing pissed. Today is the day I lose it. Every frickin' year, some lowlife comes stomping through while I'm hunting my land. I can see a perfect silhouette. I can see his head turning as he follows the deer below me. Then it just comes right out of my mouth. You know, I'm about effing fed up with you GD trespassers. His head sharply turned, looking up, and tried to find me. Every damn year you SOBs come in here trespassing. No respect for the landowners. Y'all gonna keep it up until there's bloodshed. He doesn't make a sound. No reply. I do notice he drops his head and looks straight down. All I can see is a dark figure on 2 legs. Outstretched arm holding a limb to the tree he is standing beside. What's the matter? You figure it makes you all cool just not saying anything? While I'm talking, I have pulled my binos to my eyes. I want to see this guy's face. He's only 40 yards away. I look for my binos and he disappears. I look over my binos. I clearly see a silhouette. I look back through my binos and nothing. So I do this a couple times. Upon looking back and forth a few times, I realize I can see him through the binos, but he is camouflaged perfectly with the tree, as if a mirror, or as many have said, like the predator in the movie. He never lifts his head. I can see facial features, but I can tell his head is tilted down. At this point, all my hatred and rage leaves me, which is rare for me. I feel relaxed, but I'm still talking to him. I tell him that I realize not everyone owns land, but anyone can ask permission. I give him the old, "you can do better" speech, and then I tell him, "Damn, buddy, I'd pay good money for some of that camo you're wearing. That's the best camo I've ever seen. It blends absolutely perfectly with that locust tree. I'll tell you what, why don't you tell me where you got it? What's it called?" Never a reply. At this time, it's dark. I can barely make him out. pissed off feeling starts again. You know something, buddy? I'm coming down this tree. You can shoot me if you want, but we're gonna meet face to face. I climbed down in record time, keep my eyes on him the entire climb down. As I reached the bottom, I untied my rifle and pack, pulled out my 2000 lumen flashlight, and shined it on him. He doesn't make a sound, no reply. I do notice he drops his head and looks straight down. All I can see is a dark figure on two legs, outstretched arm, holding a limb to the tree he is standing beside. What's the matter? You figure it makes you cool to just not say anything? While I'm looking, I have pulled my binos to my eyes. I want to see this guy's face. He's only 40 yards away. I look through my binos and he disappears. I look over my binos. I clearly see a silhouette. I look back through my binos and nothing. So I do this a couple times. Upon looking back and forth a few times, I realize I can see him through the binos, but he is camouflaged perfectly with the tree, as if a mirror, or as many have said, like the Predator in the movie. He never lifts his head. I can't see facial features, but I can tell his head is tilted down. At this point, all my hatred and rage leaves me, which is rare for me. That's unfortunate. I feel relaxed, but I'm still talking to him. I tell him that I realize not everyone owns land, but anyone can ask permission. I give him the old, "you can do better" speech. And then I tell him, "Damn, buddy, I'd pay good money for some of that camo you're wearing. That's the best camo I've ever seen. It blends absolutely perfectly with that locust tree. I'll tell you what, why don't you tell me where you got it? What's it called?" Never a reply. At this time it is dark. I can barely make him out. That pissed off feeling starts again. You know something, buddy? I'm coming down this tree. You can shoot me if you want, but we're gonna meet face to face. I climb down in record time, keep my eyes on him the entire climb down. As I reached the bottom, I untied my rifle and pack. Pulled out my 2000 lumen flashlight and shined it on him. It was like nothing I'd ever seen. Almost like a prism. I couldn't see it, but I couldn't see through it. At this time, I realized this thing was pushing 9 feet tall. In my mind, I thought he was on a stump or something. I told him to come on down the old logging road. "We need to talk because I'm tired of this shit." I took a couple steps, turned the flashlight back towards him, gone. So I stopped and listened, nothing. You could hear a squirrel hop at 100 yards, it was so dry, but I could hear nothing. This thing had vanished. By now it was totally dark. There was no way this thing could walk without light. And he'd damn sure make a noise. At this point I became spooked. That old sixth sense started throbbing. I couldn't move fast enough to get the quarter mile to my UTV. By the time I got the UTV started, I was in pure panic mode. I could feel something close to me. I drove the half mile to the main logging road to discover my wife driving up and down the old road in her Jeep. She was hot. "Where have you been? I've been calling your cell and driving here for an hour. Did you get one?" "Do you have to drag it out?" I asked. "What the hell are you talking about? It's maybe 5:45 p.m. It ain't been dark 30 minutes. In reality, it was about 7:30. I had lost 2 hours somewhere and I didn't have a single missed call or text on my cell. We went home and I told her what had happened. The next day, the wife and I went to the spot where the thing had stood the evening before. There was no stump beside the tree, and the limb that this thing was holding was 10, 11 feet off the ground. The ground was totally bare where it stood, almost looked clean, so to speak. After a few minutes, I got that uneasy feeling, as if we were being watched, so we left. I don't know what happened, or what I saw, and how I lost 2 hours of time is beyond me. The one thing that sticks out in my head the most is this thing never looked up, as if he thought, if I stand still and don't look at him, he will go away. Like we did as children, out of sight, out of mind. The peace that came over me during a rage was strange also. And then that same old fear rising as I was leaving. There's something to these beings. They get in our heads without speaking a word. Oh well, chalk up another one for old hairy ass. I really feel they attach themselves to some of us, or maybe some of us are just more receptive to their vibes. I would pay good money for a set of that camo. Be safe and take care, Steve. All right. That's a great email. Share. Big time. Appreciate you sending that in, man. Now, that topic is going to be for those of you whose minds are functioning open, for those of you who are honestly seeking for the truth and not trying to avoid truth. This email is going to make a lot of sense to you, I'm guessing, in the near future. Can you imagine how many people have accepted this fact as real about these other beings running around in the forest, including right behind me, all around me? How many people have accepted this fact, seen them in their headlights, been chased by one, rocks thrown at them, whatever? They accept it, they have to, because they had a slap in their face. But then they hear literally hundreds by now of honest people seeing the same things, but seeing these beings vanish into thin air. So what I'm saying is, imagine being able, you have to accept the fact of what you saw, but then you hear somebody else's testimony saying, hey, I seen this thing vanish. No, you didn't. No, I'm not listening to that. So my message to all of you right now is, if that's your mindset, you will remain stuck. You're not going to get a ticket past go. You're going to be stuck there forever until you pass. Okay? You are. For all those out there who know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. This is a very, very, very important detail and pattern that 100% of you should start focusing on and talking about loudly, because it's fact. All right? And this plays a very, very important role in all of you being able to wrap your brains around what these beings are, who they are, what they can do and what we can't do, and who we are and who we aren't. Hopefully making sense. There are some people who know what's up. They know the answers to this particular pattern, the one that a lot of us don't want to hear about. But unfortunately, it's fact. And if you want to advance your knowledge and find out true answers, you're probably going to have to accept it and look into it and talk about it and listen to other people, no matter how hard it is for you to listen. At this stage of the game, and my journey here, and a lot of other people's journey here, which is going in frickin' light warp speed compared to the past, you are going to have to accept what's previously been unacceptable and has been previously a big effort previously has been put forward to suppress these truths. Alright? Please don't shrug this shit off anymore. Especially this fact, this unbelievable, hard to wrap your brain around fact of what's going on. Because it is going on. Alright? It's a very, very important piece of the puzzle you need to start focusing on. You do. Here comes the sun again. I gotta move out of the sun. Alright. Watch for the bears. I don't know if they'll come out with these dogs howling or yipping down river or not. Okay, who's next? Like this is red. It's titled, Some of My Encounters. I saw one of the woods people kill a full-grown buck, is the title of this email. Hi Steve. For this purpose, you can call me Tony. I'm in my late 50s. Thank you for telling the stories of the lost and ignored. After discovering your channel, I've become comfortable enough that I've decided to lower my guard and tell my story. I've told only portions of these two particular experiences to only 6 people, and only to the people that I trust fully, but not to the detail that I'm prepared to do now. As for the others, I have not told anyone, but will relay those to you at a later time. It's not possible to keep these short, my apologies, but I have several direct experiences, but because of the length I'll only tell of the first two at this time. I'll be vague about the exact area to protect the area and my identity. Sounds good, man. I don't want people going to the area I hunt for these things if by chance they are still in the area. These accounts happened in 79 and 84. After all, so that's 42 and 37 years ago. Please forgive me, but I think it's necessary to be a little more detailed for credibility and so that you and your listeners can understand my nature. Great-grandmother on my mom's side was First Nations from West Texas. I always have been an adventurous person, growing up in the 60s and 70s. It'd be fair to say that I was an open-range child and very independent. I was born in California, but moved around. It was the nature of the Vietnam era as it goes. My stepdad was in the service, and I was stationed in Ohio and after California. My mom had divorced the abusive bastard, and shortly after we moved to Colorado Springs, which we lived in old Colorado City, where my curiosity about nature exploded. I would sleep outside the backyard constantly, and then I discovered that only living but a mile or so from the Garden of God's Park, Mom would take us horseback riding in the Garden of the God's Park, and I fell in love with horses then. At 8 years of age, with an army sleeping bag that a family friend gave to me and some snacks, I would sneak into the park and have a cold camp, sleeping under the stars. Eventually, some of my friends would join me. We'd tell our parents that we were spending the night at somebody's house, which was a lie, and we'd go camping like what we thought was cowboy camping. I knew that when I'd get older, that I would go on horseback, backcountry camping, hunting, and fishing, cowboy style of living. Eventually, Mom remarried a wonderful man that was in the Army and stationed at Fort Carson there at Colorado Springs. Shortly after Mom's and Dad's wedding and Dad's discharge, we relocated to his home state of Illinois, Southern Illinois to be more specific. Crab Orchard Wildlife Refuge is in the area, and the Shawnee National Forest makes up the majority of the wilderness across the entire width of Southern Illinois. Many forest and farms, cattle farms, and open land farms for primary corn or soybean crops. Almost immediately, he started teaching me how to hunt and fishing. I was 9 years old when Dad took me for the first time hunting. Within the first 20 or 30 yards of stepping into the woods, we stopped, at which time he told me what is expected of me and what is expected of being a safe hunter. Dad started talking about, as a hunter, how it was our responsibility how to act with other hunters that may be with us, how we are to respect the property that we're hunting on, how we to respect nature, and to be aware of our surroundings. Then he told me to close my eyes. I stood with my eyes closed. He told me to listen, and the woods would talk to me. He asked if I heard the birds, squirrels, and insects. He said, listen, and the natural sounds of the woods would talk to you, and that will let you know how you needed to move and where. He said, let your instincts guide you. If your instincts tell you to go left, go left. If your instincts tell you to go right, then go right. But if your instincts tell you to go home, then you go home, because that means there is a danger of some kind. He then told me to open my eyes. Then he went on to tell me to be aware of the natural sounds in the woods, because if you don't hear them, that something is wrong, and to be even more alert and listen with your instincts. These are great lessons. He also said that I can apply this to everyday life. He said, instincts would carry me through life. Trust yourself and always respect nature, because nature doesn't care who you are, and that nature will always win if you disrespect it. Being new to hunting, I couldn't comprehend the part of going home that he was talking about, because it was already told to me that there wasn't anything in the woods that would hurt me. There were no bears or wolves, and the only large cats were bobcats, and at that time no panthers. To this day, as I was taught, as soon as I step into a field or into the woods, I stop and close my eyes to listen. This starts my hunting process and the beginning of the surveying of my surroundings. It wasn't until I was older that I started seeing bobcats during my deer hunts before I would only hear them on occasions while coon hunting. This still doesn't explain that statement from my dad so many years earlier. Dad's father also taught me about hunting and the woods. His grandmother was First Nations from the Cherokee Nation, and it was obvious that Grandpa taught Dad how to hunt. More about Grandpa. Possibly at a later time, more about Grandpa, possibly at a later time of Grandpa's experience when he was stationed in Alaska during World War II, and stories from his grandmother told him. Then there are my stories of when I'd go to Sequim, Washington, to visit my biological father and hike into the Olympics, but that's for another time. In high school, I was very active in sports, especially in the track type of sport. During this time, I grew to 6 foot 4 inches, but because of the number of miles that I ran year round, as much as 16 plus miles on certain days, so to stay fit for sports, particularly track. I only weighed 145 pounds. I was pretty successful in high school sports. After high school, I still ran, just not as much, but rode a bike quite a bit, weight training, and started martial arts, at which time I started bulking up to weigh 200 pounds. As I had decided and signed up to join the U.S. Armed Service, before I was able to leave for boot camp, just in a week and a half though, I was in a work-related accident that disqualified me from entering the U.S. Marine Corps. After recovering, I had to make other plans. Before my high school graduation and accident, I grew up on a farm. We lived 4 miles out of town on a farm with 200 plus acres, another 150 to 200 acres access. During hunting season, as soon as I got off the bus, I was shedding my school clothes and jumping into my hunting clothes and out the back door, and Mom would only say, "Bring something good back." I'd go for my solo hunts, which rabbit hunting was my favorite. I'd go and let the beagle dogs run, and if it was a drizzling rain or if it was lightly snowing, I was in heaven. We trapped beavers, muskrats, hunted coyotes, and I'd run those lines and reset solely. I'd also go solo coon hunting, just me and the dogs in the woods in the middle of the night. Dad and I made very good money selling those hides/pelts. They brought good money, especially during those days. This was my way of life. It went on for several years. As an adult, I did do exactly what I say, what I was going to do. I did go on backcountry backpacking and horseback hunts and fishing trips. I've hunted many states, from hunting hogs and gators with a licensed gator hunter in Florida. I've been hunting for black bears along the East Coast and the Appalachians. I've hunted hogs in other states between the Appalachians and western states. I've been on antelope hunts in New Mexico. Moving northward from there, I've hunted for mule deer and elk and bighorns in Colorado and into Montana. Then between those states, going back east for game birds, on up into the upper peninsula of Michigan for whitetail. Very little game have I not hunted in the lower 48. Alright, we got it. My first experience was '79. I was 16 years old, and just a day after my freshman year of high school had ended, my grandfather passed away on my mother's side. My mom, dad, and my youngest sister flew out to California. Being the oldest, I would stay home. I had my summer jobs to work, summer league baseball practices, and I had cattle, horses, and dogs. 5 were hunting dogs, 5 dogs that were pets to feed. My younger brother went to friends to stay, and my other younger sisters went and stayed with family. So I had the house for an entire week to myself. Everything was great. I'd get up early in the mornings to go to work, go to practice, come home, take care of the livestock, take my shower, cook my supper, watch TV, and go to bed. Repeated this every day until Saturday. On Saturday, I went and helped a friend that was also a farmer rebuild a couple of stalls for his horses. Then I came home. Again, I took care of the livestock. I went in and took my shower, made dinner, started watching TV. It was about 11:45 p.m. when I heard something unusual. I heard soft whimpers at the front door. So, as I opened the door, I saw all 5 dogs piled on top of each other, pissing, and a couple had evacuated their bowels so bad that you could smell the scent from the anal gland. 3 of the dogs were big. The first was an adult male Rottweiler, about 130 pounds, which of course was a very good watchdog and very loving but protective. The second was an adult male Russian Black Terrier, about 140 pounds, which is also very lovable but very protective, and very good cattle dogs, which could count. When he would bring the cattle up for me to the barn, he would stand behind them, and if not all the cattle were at the barn, without having to tell him, he'd run back into the pasture to collect the rest. The third was an adult male German Shepherd, about 125. Everyone knows how very smart, loyal, and protective attributes the German Shepherd has, which he lacked nothing, believe me. Any two of those dogs alone would keep any size pack of coyotes away. I've seen them at work and run off packs of coyotes, and at least one pack with 8 or 10. The other two dogs were beagles. The dogs never came into the house, but as I opened the door, all 5 of them just about knocked me down. But because of this unusual behavior, fear gripped me, and I slammed the door and locked it and ran to lock the back door, because we never locked doors in the country back then. But for some reason, something told me that thing wasn't right. Something told me something wasn't right. I turned the TV and a few lights that were on off, so I could see anything that would cross in front of the windows, but I saw nothing, which was very dark outside, but I don't remember if the moon was out or not. Just remember, it's very dark and quiet outside. My instinct was to grab and load all of our rifles, shotguns, and pistols, which I placed some of them throughout the house as if a fallback if I needed to move through the house. I know it all sounds crazy, but I was so freaked out, and especially with our large dogs acting like they were. I moved things out of a corner of the front room and placed a chair in that corner so I could see from any direction for whatever might enter the house, and the dogs laid quiet around me as I sat in the corner. Yeah, that'd be pretty alarming for anybody, right? Big time. As I sat there, I removed the plugs out of the 3 of the 12-gauge automatic shotguns and 2 12-gauge pump shotguns, so to put more double-aught buckshot and slugs into them. I loaded everything: Springfield 30-06, 2 30-30s, Remington, bolt-action 308, Ruger Mini 14, and M1 30 caliber carbine, and assorted 16 and 20-gauge double-barrel shotguns with 2 22 rifles and assorted pistols from 45s, 357s, and 22s. Needless to say, I was loaded up for a war. I sat there wondering if I was letting my imagination getting the better of me, or even if I was going crazy. I had my radio on, very low volume, just for my comfort. Well, the dogs and I sat there for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then it happened. Something large hit 3 times. Bam, bam, bam. High up on the north side of the house, with enough force that it rattled all of the windows in the house. My blood turned cold. My head got light, and I got a sick feeling in my stomach. No doubt. The dogs laid there quiet as a mouse, and I was the one about to shit and piss myself now. About 45 minutes later, in the same place on the north side, another 2 strikes in the house, but it was abbreviated. Bam, bam. It was equally as loud. Another 30-40 minutes passed, and this time when it hit the north side of the house, it was stuck. It was struck 8 or 10 times. Bam, 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 bam. As fast as something could hit, but softer than previously. I did not move, and the dogs only moved slightly. I was quiet the rest of the night with no more strikes to the house, but the dogs were still on alert. From time to time, all would look in the same direction. Their heads were really on a swivel, ears perked, and sometimes with their noses raised as if trying to wind, but without making a noise or raising completely up. One moment they looked towards the west side of the house, another time was towards the east, front of the house. The next might be to the south, and so on. We sat there in the corner and awake until about an hour before sunrise, when I noticed that the dogs had fallen asleep. I stayed awake until daylight and fell asleep for about 45 minutes to an hour. I guessed that I had an incredible adrenaline dump, and I was wasted. When I woke up, my curiosity was high, and since it was daylight, I decided that it would be safe to go outside. Alright, moved again. All my luck. A hound dog. Really? There's 4 people downriver. I'm sitting on a boulder behind a clump of brush trying to drown out that background sound as best I can. Now the sun's coming up, it's going to create havoc on my phone. Alright, here we go. When I opened the door, the dogs ran out. I followed them outside, but the dogs stayed close and still acting a little odd. They acted like they were tracking all around the house. It's hard to explain how they were working. The 3 big dogs and one of the beagles went to the corner of the front yard, that a single row of trees going along the fence row. Those were the closest group of trees, as the majority of the land around the house was open and pastures for cattle and horses on 3 sides, and in the front was open for crops, corn or soybeans, and winter wheat. After watching the dogs, I checked the west side of the house and didn't see anything noticeable, other than dust off the siding at the height of an outstretched arm from my 6'4" frame and about 7.5 feet to almost 8 feet high. Nothing noticeable on the ground. There is grass, but it was short because it was recently mowed. The ground was hard. Okay, I almost pulled the pin on this email. It's a very long email with a lot of detail that isn't directly pertaining to these beings that we're interested in hearing experiences about, but it all relates, and I jumped ahead, and it gets, there's more experiences in here, just so you know. And also, I think my impatience is being fueled by those hound dogs in the background and those people yelling. I hate losing my patience, but I'm back. So just so you know, this email is going to get interesting, alright? More interesting, sorry. When the dogs came over to me, I walked around the house and went over to the corner of the yard, and I saw nothing. Believe me, I looked hard. I looked for anything that could explain why I just sat all night in a freaking chair in the corner with 5 dogs that were more likely scaredy cats than dogs, with a small arsenal at arm's reach, that a small South American country could use to defend itself against invaders. But Mom and Dad were to arrive home fairly soon, so I had to get straight to work to clean up after the dogs, which I burnt popcorn on purpose to help mask any smells of the dogs that I couldn't clear out. Get the living room back in shape and unload all the guns, replace the plugs before they got home. When Mom and Dad came home, I never told them what happened the night before. First of all, I didn't even know how to start. And besides, I'm supposed to be grown enough to be able to stay by myself. After all, they know how many times that I've been out hunting and fishing alone. If my parents ever questioned my independence, or because the first time they left me alone and I got scared, well, they would never let me do anything alone again. After that, though, if I ever go outside at night, I'd make it an excuse to at least take my 30-30, which usually the excuse is for coyotes. Still not knowing what it was. I never had the first thought of Bigfoot because they don't hit the side of houses, right? That's how naive I was on the subject. I never heard stories about them and didn't have any idea about them hitting the side of houses. In Illinois, there was a creature referred to as Momo, but I never linked it to a Bigfoot-type creature. Nothing else ever happened like that again. Our parents have passed away, and I never really talked to them about this incident but years later I asked my brother if he had something like that happen, or if he knows if Mom or Dad had, which he said no. Nothing like that happened at the farm to him, but he told me of a bear sighting that he and his girlfriend had one time while parked out in the Shawnee National Forest. I said, you know, that wasn't a bear because Illinois doesn't have bears. He said, yes, he knows, but he had to tell her something because she was freaking out so bad. He said it was very dark in the trees, but he could see something on all fours and very wide. But the light that was bleeding through the tops of the trees were enough that he could see it rocking side to side. At that time, he drove them out of the area, as in his words, like a bat out of hell. He drove me to the spot, and even though the vegetation changed from so long ago, the rocks and small bluff are the same it was then. We walked over to where he had seen the bear, which was 30 to 35 yards from where his car was that night. My experience caused me to be frightened of the night, which I hated because I spent so much time at night by myself, whether it was hunting or fishing. I eventually fought back the fear, but alone in the woods at night wasn't the same as before my experience. I'm always on guard and cautious. As I became more skilled at hunting, I've had bobcats climb the very trees that I was hunting out of on several occasions. I've had bobcats and their cubs pass by me. A few of those times they were from 20 to 35 yards away, and a couple times within 15 yards as I was stalking deer. I've personally seen 2 black panthers and 1 chocolate brown panther that the Forestry Service discounted quickly. 2 of those times were with a co-worker who saw them also. These sightings were between the years of 2000 and 2002. Alright, my company's left. I moved back into some shadows again so I could read smoother. Years before those panther sightings, I became a very successful hunter with a bow and gun, but to challenge myself, in the early 80s I primarily became a stalking bow hunter. As hunting gear is limited to what it is nowadays, I made my ghillie suit and modified knee-high moccasins by waterproofing, insulating them, and changing the soles to more comfortable but flexible gumshoe soles to be more stealthy. I'm a great believer in changing my emotion in the woods in hopes of changing my pheromone signature to calm and not as a predator. I believe a person's body transmits these chemical changes and the animals can smell those. I could sit in a fence row and have deer walk by me so close that I literally can harvest a deer with a knife if I so desired. I've stalked within 25 yards of bedded whitetail bucks, taken me a couple of hours, but that's how I challenge myself. I was 22 in mid-November of '84, and light snow was falling when I decided to go hunting. My wife at the time was going to be busy with her mom, which we usually spent time together on my days off, seeing that I had a busy schedule. I had a full-time job and part-time I was a preacher. I wanted to get in some hunting in before deer shotgun season came in because I stopped hunting right before, because with all the hunters which I use in the loosest of terms from Chicago and other places, as they hunt and shoot up the country while making what they refer to as sound shots to get the deer stirred up and out of their routine. So I went to an area a mile west of the farm that I grew up on. There are two sets of tracks in this area. One is for the through train to run past, as the other set is for a train to pull into and wait until the other train passes. Along these sections of track were great hunting grounds because it's a large area absent of people, homes, and no one ever makes the effort to walk to this area back then. As I said before, I was 21 years old in mid-November of '84. It was snowing and I was parked just off the side of the road that intersects with the tracks about a mile to the north of the double tracks. On this day, as I would any other time, I walked on the tracks to my hunting area. As I walked, I saw that there was a train sitting idle. It was waiting for another train to pass. As I walked alongside the train, I got to the end, or should I say the caboose. There were four men standing on the back platform, and they were looking over in an open area of sage grass. They saw me standing on the opposite side of the tracks and were motioning to me to look over to where they were looking. I saw a twitch in a small fallen tree. The railroad guys motioned to me to come on up onto the platform with them so I could see better. There was one of the large bucks that I'd seen in the area. Previously, it was too young to harvest, but not this year. It was his time, as I was thinking to myself. This buck was a massive whitetail, 12 points, easily scoring 160 plus inches and every bit of 220 pounds. We watched it for a while, and they talked about how nice it was compared to others that they've been seeing during the years while working on the railroad. We talked for 40 minutes or so when the train was seen coming from the other direction. I told the men thanks and greeted them goodbye and safe travels, then climbed down. I walked back the way I came beside the train, so to walk down off of the track embankment opposite the deer to mask my movement below its line of sight of the buck and behind the rise of the tracks. I then doubled back to the south past the point that the buck was laying. I moved to a little bridge that allowed the railroad tracks to span across a ditch that allows water to run off of some small lakes and marshy areas. I walked under the bridge to the other side of the tracks and used the ditch that ran alongside the tracks back towards the north to the position of the buck. I started getting an unusual feeling that I couldn't quite place. I counted it to the unusual events that the train played, but that didn't satisfy my feeling. It was an uneasy feeling. I continued my hunt. My thinking was that I was getting close to the buck. I climbed the little ledge of the embankment to parallel to start my stalk towards the buck's broadside while allowing the fallen tree that it was using to help block its sight during my approach. As I raised my head just over the edge, I noticed that I was just forward to where the head end of the buck was pointing previously. As I was getting ready to lower myself to move a little further to be more parallel, but I noticed the buck was standing and looking into the woods that he earlier had his back end towards. You could see that he was alerted to something in the woods because whatever that was, it had this buck's attention. I figured that my stalk was going to be a bust, so I just watched, and for a few minutes later the buck bolted. It ran around the south end of the fallen tree and then towards the railroad tracks. As it got to the edge of the embankment that I was peering over, it turned to its right, running along the edge and past me just inches away. It ran just past me, cutting back to his right again, heading slightly diagonal from me towards another stand of trees. As the buck ran through a separation of somewhat thick honeysuckles and briar bush going growth, heading towards an opening into the woods that was just beyond the growth, and that's when my life changed forever. Just as the head of the buck cleared the honeysuckles and briars, a large hand that was attached to an enormous arm reached out and grabbed the buck by its lower part of its right antler. With one fluid moment, as a tennis player making a perfect backhand, the buck was lifted into the air and was slammed into a tree. The buck went immediately limp, and the massive figure threw the buck to the ground. This thing was moving, as I could only guess. This thing was moving as I could only guess that it was using its foot to nudge the buck on the ground. This creature was looking around like it was looking for someone to say, "Look at what I did too." This creature never acted as if it knew that I was there. I could not see exactly what it was doing with its feet because of its height of the sage grass, but I could only see from its knees up. I saw this at about 25 to 30 yards. As it was overcast, and this happened within the slightly darkened edge of the woods, that it was behind the vines of honeysuckles and briars, and the fact that I was able to maintain surprises me to this day. I watched what might have been a minute to a minute and a half. The description of this figure is of a very large male. I could see the genitals. A very large male creature that was at least twice the width of the buck it just killed. It was 8 to 8.5, 8 feet to 8 foot and a half. The genitals were proportionate to the size of this creature. The proportion of the hand that I saw, dark brown skin on the palm portion with reddish brown hair over most of the back of the hand. Its arm was hairy and I could see a little skin underneath. From right below the elbow, the hair was 8 to 10 inches, with what looked like a shorter haired coat underneath, running up the arm to the shoulder onto the back as it blended in to the longer hair on its back. The hair from the shoulders and the back of the head blended with what looked like a long hair that tapered down the middle of its back and looked like a cape to a V shape that ended in the small of its back. The hair falling towards the ground as the arm was raised. Long hair was on the head and around the face. Shorter hair was on the cheeks, and it had a large man-like nose that was bulbous in shape, wide and very rounded, but not grotesque for the size of this creature. The skin that I could see looked kind of light grayish, but on its face and palm was dark brown. The head was rounded like a human's head. The shoulders were rounded and as large, if not a little bigger than a bowling ball. The side of this creature's torso did not taper to the waist, but it was broad. I'd bet that if this thing was holding whiskey barrels, that you would struggle to see the barrel, if could at all, as its back was turned to you. Huge buttock, bubble butt, and very muscular to the thighs. It had to be at least 45 inches around. As it moved, I could see the muscles move under the shorter hair. The body was of the shape of a power lifter, not a bodybuilder. I heard it make some clicking and was sounded like lip smacking noises. That's when I heard a response from the woods to the right in the direction that the buck had been staring moments earlier. That's when my inner voice screamed, "There's another one?" That's when I dropped down below the edge of the embankment, pressed my back into the embankment so hard that I was trying to become that embankment, and put my hand over my mouth. Not to hold back my screaming myself, but to try to calm my breathing and keep it quiet. My mind raced. Have I been seen by the second creature? I started thinking that the first one had to have been right there when I was up on the platform with the railroad men. I knew my fear would be smelled if I stayed. Thoughts of what do I need to do to make my retreat without being detected. I hugged the side of the embankment and I went back the way I came, but being even more careful not to make any mistake in making myself detected. I made it back down the ridge and climbed underneath to the other side of the tracks, still staying crouched as I walked. I started hearing a noise of the likes that I've never heard. It was like a guttural growling. Glug, 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 glug. And it went on, with short pauses in between each series. Then it dawned on me that it was keeping pace with me from the ditch just on the other side of the tracks. That would suck. When I got to an area that was opened up to a piece of farmland at the end of the bottleneck of the railroad tracks and strip pit, I immediately started walking away from the tracks. Without running, but my pace would have given any Olympic speed walker a race. I walked over towards the strip pit thinking that if I needed to, I'd drop my bow and dive into the water of the strip. I knew I'd be safe if I had to go for a swim, right? After all, these things can't swim. For the life of me, it didn't dawn on me that these creatures could swim, if that tells you just how ignorant I was on this topic. I didn't have to dive in, but I did walk to a farmhouse a little out of the way. Once I got to the blacktop road, I walked back to my car. I jumped in, drove back to town, but pulled over and stopped before getting back into town. The experience ran through my mind. I was safe, but why didn't I feel safe? I got back to my house but said nothing to my young wife. How could I? Over the next few months, my personality changed and I had issues sleeping. I questioned my faith, which is not a good place to be for an inspiring preacher. My attention was distracted. I'm sure it was PTSD, but who could ever tell my experience to? My wife and I separated the following spring, and our divorce was final towards the end of summer. I lost 40 to 45 pounds during this time, making me look like a skeleton. But who could I tell? If I had to tell my wife what happened, I believe that she would have divorced me still. My personality continued to change. About the noise that I heard on that day, I heard something similar but not exact a couple of years later after I moved to Florida. I was in the swamp, frog gigging with friends, and I got a little sick to my stomach. I was noticeably affected that my friends could tell. I didn't tell them about my experience, but asked about the noise. That's gators, they said. In their confidence, I immediately got better. Of course, it wasn't gators that I heard. There are no alligators in southern Illinois. I stopped going into the woods alone for the longest time, and I don't go without being armed. Since that time, I have a much better sense of the woods and understand much better than before. I now understand things of the woods that my dad and grandpa told me all those many years ago. As a person learns of the smell of a skunk from their first whiff, I believe people become in tune to recognize those feelings and associations. That's why if you have one indisputable encounter, you'll have another encounter. I've learned the feelings of presence in the woods, and I listen to those feelings. I leave the woods in those cases. There have been times that I could not leave, and there have been times while on multi-day hunts with others in the middle of nowhere, I couldn't just leave. I've had other encounters, noises, limb breaks, and we once were harassed by 4 woods people. Sun's glaring my face off here, off the water. I've had other encounters, noises, limb breaks, and were once harassed by 4 woods people. I refer to them myself woods people because they are not monkeys. They are more human than they are given credit. I know they use intelligence, and with that type of intelligence, a creature like this must be capable of so much more. They eat, multiply, are curious, love, caring, and many other emotions that almost all humans have and exhibit. They even exhibit the emotions that make us animals, Sorry you spelt it AM. Excuse me. This is where I'll stop, but I can send an email describing the encounter in the Colorado Rockies if you'd like, where 7 others and I had 4 woods people running around our camp one night with one possible dogman encounter and of my grandpa's story. Please continue the good work that allows so many of us to have a voice without being scoffed at and ridiculed. And after all, who else are we going to be able to tell? Whew! Was that the longest one, or is it just because I've been distracted by all these sounds everywhere and getting frustrated? I don't know. It's quite the experience, man. Quite the experience. I'm sure you could have shortened it up a little bit, but that's fine. We all tell stories differently, and that is fine and acceptable here. What a thing to witness. What a shitty thing to have that big buck get taken by that thing instead of you, right? What a thing to witness. We've heard of a lot of people, what comes to mind, I've heard of people seeing from their tree stands. One particular hunter saw from tree stand a female one stalking tree to tree and some hogs that were feeding close to a stand, and she leapt at it, starting like a frog in a way, I think he described, leapt at it like greased lightning, and she slapped the 100 plus, maybe 200 pound hog, slapped it, and it went flying into a tree, and the impact killed it. What? Right? Had a lot of people seeing these things hunting hogs. Carrying bears near where I used to live in the Duffy Highway. People seen one running across the highway with a white mountain goat under its arm. You've been seen with bears, with elk, everything. But anyway, I gotta get back. I wish I got more voices heard, but this should be suffice for today. But I gotta get back. I gotta can a bunch of salmon today. And I gotta finish my front gate pillars, get ready. So Sarah's gonna stain them. She wants to be proud of her new gate that I built for her for when her family gets here. And then I am going back out to the coast, and I'm gonna go film and fish and do what I do out there. And I got a guide as well, and keep this ball rolling. Damn, there's a few things that reading the emails remind me of things I want to say, and then I lose them. I want to start babbling. But one thing I was going to say, I just want you to think about this one. A lot of people, the big question is, why doesn't the government speak openly about this? Why doesn't the government come clean and tell us what they knew about this? Why? You know, my stance on the government, first off, my attitude is, screw the gov. I don't need those assholes for nothing. Now, some people have said the reason they feel the government won't acknowledge these beings is because they may go annihilate them. How am I going to word this? My brain's not meshing up my lips again. Some people have been scared that if these beings were acknowledged by the government, people would go out and try to annihilate them. Now, what I'm trying to get out of me is, have you ever thought of the fact that maybe possibly these beings would annihilate the government? Think about that one, alright? Think about the patterns I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this video, which to me seems 3 hours ago. But think about that one. Think about the absolute possibility that these beings could possibly do to us all of that plus more if they felt like it. Think about that one. All right? Think about the possibility that maybe there's already been a warning to humans to absolutely leave them alone and don't talk about them or else. Right? You never know. But it seems to be a bit of a possibility to me at this point of the game. Maybe. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm thinking out loud. It would make sense though, wouldn't it? It would possibly make sense for the group of people who seem to be in control of the mainstream knowledge and news and the education program, etc. And there's 3 salmon 6 feet from me right now. You have to let me move. 4 of them. Cool. Sorry, little interruption there. That's kind of cool. I got 4 sockeye salmon swimming around right by my feet. Cool. Anyway, babbling. But that's the thought I want to share. You guys think about that one. Think about that one. What could stop the people that do not stop at controlling us, dictating to us? What could possibly stop them from acknowledging the existence of what is a supernatural being today, right? The only thing you could do to a government to stop them from acknowledging, if that's what you wished, was to scare them, threaten them. And they would have to feel there's nothing they can do about that, right? Am I making sense? I hope so. Anyway, I'm going to get ripping, you guys, and I'm going to be sharing a lot more from the coast or in the timber on the way there, wherever I am. I'm going to be sharing more and more and more and more, and things are going to start to ramp up, all right? It's been quite the ride. It's been quite the ride. I'll be back shortly.